Welcome to part 14 of this series, trying to locate the sons of Noah and where they really went to. This is going to be a short summary of what we've been speaking about, because we've been looking at these sons of Noah, Ham, Japheth and Shem, and this is the consensus of scholars, that Japheth is a sphere towards the north in Europe, that Shem is a sphere here in the Middle East and Arabia, and Ham is dominantly in the sphere in Africa. I just want to show you something from the book of Jubilees, because it says that the land of Japheth is cold. So that makes sense with this sphere here going towards northern Europe. And then it says that the land of Ham is hot. So that also makes sense, because we've spoken about the land of Ham, and you can describe that as a hot region. But the one that doesn't make sense is Shem, because we see that sphere for Shem in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, but the book of Jubilees says that the land of Shem is neither hot nor cold, but it is a blended cold and heat. Now this description doesn't really fit, because if you look at this region, you can see it's very dry and arid, and we would describe this as a hot region. It suffers from oppressive heat, constant heat. But if you look where we've been looking, if you want to go below the equator, what's called Sub-Saharan Africa, you can see how it becomes lush and green, and you have these large lakes and rivers. And if we think about that description of Jubilees one more time, that the land of Shem is neither hot nor cold, but it is a blended cold and heat, and we think about this region, it does get hot in this region, but it doesn't suffer that extreme heat, that oppressive heat, constant heat of this region. And it does get cold in this region, but it doesn't get that same kind of cold in the northern hemisphere. We think about Siberia and Scandinavia. So how could you describe this? Maybe the way the Jubilees describes it is actually very fitting, that it's a blended of cold and heat, because the land of Shem is supposed to be a good land, and everything in it is supposed to be good, like it says in Jubilees, a spacious land. So that's what we've been looking at, and that's why we're looking at this region. But I thought that this quote really kind of sums it up nicely for the land of Shem. Now, I also want to try to tie in some other things that we've been speaking about, because in part 12 with the Hittites, we spoke about the Hittites sacking Babylon, and then they gave control over to Babylon to their Kassite allies. Remember that, the Kassites. It's mysterious people, where it says here, don't confuse them with the Cushites. And remember, there was a connection that some people were trying to speculate about Sanskrit and the Kassites, which was interesting. But then in part 13 we spoke about, was Sumerian Kish really the biblical Cush? So the Sumerian Kish, we tried to equate this with Cush, because this was the first place that has kings after the deluge. So I just want to see if we can try to tie these things together, because thinking about this region, we're talking about Elam being possibly in this region, but this is known as Ethiopia. So I was thinking that some people might get confused, where we know this is as Ethiopia today, and in the Bible, Ethiopia and Cush is used interchangeably. So if you're saying Ethiopia, you could also think Cush. So then why are you saying this is Elam, if we know it as Ethiopia? And it's to do with this Susa. We've spoken about Susa, also known as Susiana. It's this connection between Susa and Cush. Let's try to tie this all together. So let's have a look. I found this article, and they were speaking about mighty Elam. Okay, let's listen to this part here. It says that Susiana, with its capital of Susa, or Kisia. Okay, so Susa was also called Kisia, which is very, very interesting. And it goes on further to say, okay, now we're speaking about Elam, and it says, sometimes it is called Kisia, sometimes Elam, or Elamias. Okay, so it's saying that this Elamites, they were conquered and overran by Kissians, or Kossians, and see how it connects it to the Cushites. Kissians, Kossians, or Cushites. And because they conquered this region of Elam, they named it after themselves Kisia. So this is fascinating, because it's saying that Elam itself was also called Kisia. So let's look at these Kissians or Kossians and see what we can find, because it's really, really gets interesting, because look here, straight away, the Kosei, oh, they're saying it could be related to the Kassites. See that? So now we're really getting this kind of linking together. So the Kosei connected to the Kassites, and in this article it's connecting these Kosei or Kisei to the Kushites. So we see how it said here that don't confuse us with the Kushites, this Kassites. But now we're seeing that there could be links to that. But let's just carry on, because this Kosei is linked to the Kisei. Okay, so I just want to show you what it says about that, because this area known as Kisei was a district of Susiana or Susa. But I want to read this part from Herodotus, because he says that these inhabitants were wild, a free people, resembling the Persians. You see that? So that's a very interesting that Herodotus is saying that these Kissians, or Kossians, or Kushites, resemble the Persians, that there's connection to the Persians. You see how it kind of starts tying together, because we spoke about the Persian historian recounting this tradition of a wife of Cush. The wife of Cush was named Carnival, daughter of Batuil, son of Tyrus, and that she bore him Abyssinians, Sindhis, and Indians. See that? So Cush and Tyrus, this combination, producing Abyssinians, Sindhis, and Indians. And now we've got this connection with Herodotus saying that these Kissians or these Kossians and these Kushites resemble Persians. So this is very important for the work that we're doing with these Persians, how we're trying to tie them into the story. So that's going to be very important as we go forward to think about that. So this Susa is like a variant of the Kassite name Kissia. So I want to show you how this is tying together, that when you're thinking about Susa, it's connected to Kissia. But I want to show you this because Pliny calls these Kosei, or these Kissians, Kushi, or Kusi. So you see how it's all kind of connecting together, that what this article is speaking about, how it's linking these Kissians, or these Kossians, to Kushites, is actually making sense. But they're also connected to the Kassites. So this is, I just want to show you the history, the potential of the history to support this, because he's saying that this region of Elam was known as Kissia, because these Kissians, or these Kossians, or maybe even these Kassites, conquered Elam, and then called that region Kissia. Let's just see if we can find the history for it. If we go to, so this is the Kassite dynasty of Babylon that we're speaking about. But look how it says here, at the peak of their power, the Kassites conquered Elam and the capital of Susa. So this potentially could be the history of when Elam started becoming known as Kissia, when these Kassites conquered Elam and Susa. See that? And that could link that to what we were speaking about here, that the Elamites were overrun or conquered by the Kissians, or the Kossians, or the Kushites. But that's also possibly linked to the Kassites. So I know it's a little bit confusing, because there's like lots of these different details, but I hope you can see how it's actually potentially fitting. If we just recap, because in this video we said we're trying to link Sumerian Kish to Kush, okay? Because now we can see that Kush is connected with these different variations, like Kosei, or the Kassites, or the Kissians. So you can see that this Kish, it's not fanciful to link that to Kush at all, because you can see this link between Kissi, Kossi, and Kush. And then we also spoke about in part 12 about this Kassites, and that the Kassites, we had this link to Sanskrit. See that? That the Kassites were linked to Sanskrit. So how does that make sense? But we can see when we speak, when we spoke about this, that Kush was actually producing nations like the Sindhis and the Indians. Can you see that? So there is a connection between Kush and the Indian culture, which could explain why they're making these connections to Sanskrit with the Kassites. And that the final thing, which is going to be important, is that Herodotus is linking these people to resembling the Persians. So that's really going to be interesting as we go forward, because we're going to be speaking about the Persians quite a lot. And another interesting thing is that this region that we're speaking about, Kissia and Susa, is connected to, it's near the region of Media Magna. Look at that. And we're going to be speaking about the Medes. So it's all kind of tying together. So I just wanted to show you that. I know there was a lot of different details there, and you might have to watch it again to fully see what we're speaking of. It's a little bit complicated, but I wanted to show you that even though this is known as Ethiopia and is connected to Kush, that calling this Elam doesn't mean that we're actually wrong, or that we're looking in the wrong place, because we've just shown how Susa is connected to this word Kissia. So Susa is connected to Kush, and we know that Kush was in this region because the kingdoms of Kush, but that even the region of Elam became known as Kissia, possibly when these Kassites conquered the territory. So even though this is Ethiopia, it doesn't mean that we might be wrong to be looking for the land of Elam, because it's starting to make sense how Elam is connected to Kush, and also the Persians. The Persians being in this region is starting to look even more likely. Remember, we were speaking about we're looking for a Persian Gulf in part 1 and part 2. But okay, I think the video has gone a bit longer than I wanted to, because it was supposed to be a short summary, but this really could be important as we're going forward, these details, just to try and understand them a bit better, and they'll become more clearer as we carry on with the series, because we're going on to the series of Japheth now. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next part.